set to launch.
I gotcha. Okay, all right. I was just what I try and do is like I hit record and then I just try and get going, get a running start at it by introducing and doing some house cleaning leading up to Jeffrey's arrival, and then I hit pause and then we go stream and then I hit record. So now very officially we're here on Public Access America and I'm with Jeffrey and it's Sunday, which means I don't know what's going on, Jeffrey. I feel flubbled this week. I feel totally ill prepared this week.
Why would you feel ill prepared for this week?
I don't, the discussion is more broad. It's less, I mean, Joe Biden had a speech and I just didn't feel like covering that. And so
Mm.
it's just hard to get topics going. Wait, don't get me wrong. What we did this Saturday, we posted Joe Biden's speech with
Hmm.
with a chapter list, so that people could hear what he actually had to say instead of just getting the clips and listening to the rhetoric. That's what we're about because
Hmm.
and then as well as I've noticed by looking at our stats, other countries, and they have been since 5 years ago, they've been listening to us because it's just general unfiltered American stuff. And then they also listen to us as like the government might be fucked up, but the people, they're still cool. So, there's hope.
You know, that's one of the things that I try to caveat with every discussion that we have.
Right.
You know, it's I don't fundamentally have a problem with the people of any country. The people are no different than the people in this country. Most of us are just trying to get by. We're trying to get our
Mhm.
basic needs. We're just trying to live our lives and find that, meaningful pursuit of happiness.
Yeah.
So like, we get these politicians that talk about how each of these countries are the enemy, and then all these, you get people who go into these countries and they're like, wait a minute, this doesn't feel like I'm in enemy territory.
Right.
And that's the manufacturing of politicians most of the time. It's there's rarely an instance where we probably fundamentally would not get along as people.
Right.
We've all got our left crazy, we've all got our right crazy, we've all got our authoritarian crazy, we've all got our libertarian crazy.
Yeah. We're
You
okay.
know, but for the most part though, your average person in China or Russia or Iran or Germany or Uganda or
Hmm.
Sudan are probably just regular everyday people just trying to get by, and there you can't hold anything that governments do against the people themselves, because oftentimes, as we're well aware of, we don't have the level of control over our governments that we would like to.
Well, there's this thing I think, and it's this magician trick that Trump just made so obvious, and it's we're going to throw a bunch of bullshit up in the air so that you go and chase that down, and then you're not going to see what we're doing. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
And that's the and so basically every note I tried to make on it was just about the perspectives in which we're seeing things. We're just so ready to believe these stories because we want to be the first one to tweet about it or mention it or have an opinion on it, but we don't take the time it takes to gather the facts about it, you know? That,
I would say that that level of magicianship is not distinctly Trump.
no,
That level of that
it's
level of magicianship, existed during Obama's time period.
yeah,
It
yeah.
existed during W's time period, Clinton's time period, like in general, politicians have this, great, fireworks show of all the things we're going to do, and everybody's going ooh
Right.
ah, and while you're looking up, they're doing
Yeah.
some sneaky shit underneath, and you don't ever catch it, or you might catch part of it because you're like, huh, I wonder where that's coming from. And then you're like, oh wait, that's
Right.
not what I expected.
Well, that's because we're conflating two things. We're putting two things together, and it's politics and governing. And like governing is the actual work, but politics is this like it's this atmosphere around governing to prevent you from actually seeing the what you want
It's
to like. I was talking to Adam and I brought up the Joe Biden speech and he's like, I'd like to actually hear that because I've been hearing things about it. And I was like, well, don't get me wrong, Adam. Like, I'm not a fan of Joe Biden right now because he's not helping me yet. And what he said in his speech is a wish list. It's not things he's achieved, which is what the Democrats tend to do is say, I wish for this, give me credit now. And,
right.
and
And the
that's,
Republicans did the same thing too. And
yeah,
then that's,
right.
and that's, I call these speeches cheerleader speeches
Hmm.
because everybody gets to hear, the cheerleader screaming, and everybody else gets to repeat back and clap, and we all drink the Kool-Aid, and then we end up like Jonestown. I mean,
Yeah, yeah,
no,
yeah.
no, it really, the
That's
thing,
my analogy. Jonestown is my analogy for the Trumpists.
it's the analogy for the Trumpists, it's the analogy for the Democrats. It's just different
Mm.
Kool-Aid is all it is.
Oh,
One Kool-Aid's red, one Kool-Aid's blue. You know, so the the fundamental issues that I have with all of these speeches is that everybody gets riled up, and
Mhm.
everybody's like, "Oh, Biden's going to make all of these things happen, and he's saying all the right words." Okay, that's great. You can say anything that you want that sounds right. Now tell me what are you actually going to do about it? You
Mhm.
know, it's it's important when you hear the president of the United States say things like, that we're going to work on ending child hunger. Now that sounds lovely, and I saw someone post, the Republicans didn't stand up and clap. Why would you not clap at that? Well, okay, how are you actually going to do that? What are you actually going to do that is going to
Mhm.
end child hunger? Because for as long as I can remember, every party has talked about ending child hunger,
Of course, we all want to end child hunger. It's
but
just
that's all it is. It's
how do
talk.
we go about doing it?
Talk is cheap. Talk is absolutely cheap.
Yeah,
And the why is talk cheap? Because it costs you absolutely nothing to say bullshit.
that's right.
So until there's an actual plan that comes out that says child hunger is a problem, and through these specific targeted investments, this is how we're going to address child hunger
Hmm.
and get something moving.
It's called a bill. It's called a proposal. And you have to submit
Exactly.
one for it to get it started. And not only can the Senate do it, not only can the House of Representatives do it, not only can the president do it, but any person on the planet can create a policy or a request for a policy and submit it. It's
Hmm.
just we don't get together to do that. And why don't we get there to do that? Because Republicans are starving, Democrats are starving, but we're so politicized that we can't pool our resources together to actually have a voice in government. We just get these avatars in there and our avatars yell at each other and we're like, that's what politics is, but that's not what governing is.
Right, exactly. And the number of issues where, you cross the aisle multiple times. The child hunger thing, just because that one's fresh in my mind, is,
Hmm.
like you said, there are Democrats' kids going hungry, there are Republicans' kids going hungry. How do you address that in the most, I would say, in the most fundamental way that ensures that, number one, kids are getting adequate nutrition. Number two, kids are able to get nutrition when they're wherever they're at. That would be
Right.
my second. And number three is, how do you help families build themselves up so that way this isn't an issue in the future?
Right.
Some places have tried to address it, in, I would say, less than satisfactory ways. Some places have done a better job at it. I'm actually somewhat impressed with the way Washington State has handled it during the pandemic, because the school lunch cafeteria never closed down, and any kid could go into the school to pick up a lunch. And in some cases they were actually busing lunches to, the bus stop, and
Yeah,
kids could come pick up breakfast and lunch.
I like
It
that.
was, so to me it's like, these were things like, bus drivers were doing the routes, they were still getting paid to do their routes,
Hmm.
but they weren't picking up kids. So if they're still going to do their routes and kids still need to eat, how do we actually make this work? Oh, I
Yeah.
got it. We have a bus driver show up and do a route in the morning or in the afternoon. Morning has lunch, has breakfast and a snack, breakfast and lunch, or evenings has a snack and a dinner, or on Fridays you get food for the weekend.
Yeah.
Like being and you are starting to probably hear people on the right screaming, but that's socialism. It's like, okay, well, what if I told you that all of those meals are coming from American farmers and American ranchers, and that by making sure that these kids are eating food from this country, we're satisfying that need, because that's already a federal requirement, just so you know.
Okay.
So because the school lunch program is paid for, I believe it is through the Department of Agriculture,
Okay.
you have those restrictions in place that require that school lunches now are really being involved at your farmer level. So how do you get farmers more involved so that way their crops aren't, wasting away or
Right.
being left behind? The reality is that you have all of these different pieces in play, but nobody is willing to sit down and step across the aisle to actually work out this mechanism of how do you actually put all of these pieces together so that way they work like a clock.
Right. Because
We want to yell at each other.
it isn't just farmers that are going to solve this problem. It's
Right.
everybody. It's Jeffrey seeing a kid that, one of his friend's kids that's hungry. So you just invite them over for meals more often. It's community centers, it's churches, it's your
Hmm.
council. It's everybody seeing the issue, addressing it the best way they can. And then the things that are worthy and good, they last, and that's the point. And then that's what creates policy, not some
Hmm.
politician saying, oh, I need to get reelected, so I'm going to invest in Snap today. You know what I mean?
Right, exactly. So the idea that we couldn't solve this between either one party or the other is completely irrelevant. We
Mhm.
have all of these pieces that make it possible. The question is how do we actually get together and make that happen?
Yeah.
Because the reality is that if the children are going hungry, there's a good chance that the parents are going hungry too.
Yeah.
I will say most parents sacrifice their own in order to make sure their kids are fed. I've seen it done myself. I've experienced that on my own. So
Right.
the reality of the situation is that if the kids are hungry, the parents are hungry, and if the parents are hungry, let's be realistic. People are going to do what it takes to survive and put food on the table.
Yeah.
So what does that mean?
Anything.
And what does that mean we should be doing? It means we should be figuring out how does a country with probably the most food waste in the world
Hmm.
reduce that?
Yeah.
You know, there are ways that this can be done and achieved, and ways that I would say arguably benefit everybody.
Yeah. But instead of pushing the responsibility on just somebody, we should all be, our homeowners association should be doing what they can. The federal government should be doing what they can, but not everything. They could just submit a living wage that goes with the cost of living. Like, they
Hmm.
could do that instead of, they want a $15 minimum wage by 2024 when it should be 24 in 2024. And we think we're getting something ultra special, and everybody's fighting it because Joe Manchin doesn't like it, but yet his own state just raised the minimum wage. You know what I mean?
Right,
So,
and when you have states that are raising the minimum wage as it is,
mhm,
and the state minimum wage overrides the federal minimum wage. So at least if you're going to believe states' rights as a thing, then states minimum wage overrides the
sure.
fed. So my hope is that while I would like to see the feds say that $15 an hour is the minimum wage, really the only thing that I can really expect from them to say is that any federal contractor has to pay a minimum wage of $15 an hour.
Yeah. And
That much is happening.
that was in Biden's speech.
Yep. So that much is expected, but but
Mhm.
by states raising the minimum wage, and excuse me,
No problem.
and if states actually um, have the work and have a $15 minimum wage, you are going to see states lose employees to other states. I mean, that's just
Okay.
that's just the way that it goes. And I shall say within reason, because obviously somebody who's, completely flat on their ass poor is going to have a very difficult time getting to a place where they can actually go to work and make $15 an hour. And that's always one of my favorite arguments is, well, why don't you just move to where you can get a better wage? Have you tried driving anywhere with zero gas in your tank and $0 in your pocket? And
Yeah.
I mean, you don't get very far very quickly.
No, people haven't stayed where they were for centuries living in it because they choose to. Like I came from Chicago and I was like, man, Illinois is so blue, I don't make a difference. But Florida's turning purple. So I moved to Florida because I was like, at least my vote might start changing something. But people don't do that. I mean, there's
Mhm.
people in Alabama that are being lynched and killed and picked on that stay there. And it's not because of their morals or their convictions, you know.
Right, and that's really unfortunate. you
Yeah,
know, there should be an ease and ability to find work and migrate work. My argument would be that the feds should do whatever it takes to loosen restrictions for people to benefit from relocating to go to work somewhere else. There should be
sure.
something that makes it easier for them to do that.
Yeah, or
Honestly, like what it comes down to is that our infrastructure is piss poor. I will
oh,
put it that way.
eighth in the world.
And honestly, like that doesn't say a whole lot for me
Can you
because
think of eight countries that would be technologically superior to us? Any eight countries in the world?
I would go with South Korea, I would go
Mm-hmm.
with Japan, I would
Yep.
go with Germany.
Yep.
Um, Part of me wants to say France as well.
I mean, you're really reaching though. I mean, that's my point,
Um,
is that you can't, I mean, eventually you're gonna hit countries
the
that you
Nordic
would
countries, I would say, would probably have better infrastructure than we do.
less
So
maybe
it's
like
not about
China, you know what I mean?
China.
Definitely.
China, well, but how they get their infrastructure is another story.
Hmm.
Looking at slave labor.
And a superior coal plant to a inferior nuclear plant isn't the same thing.
Right, exactly. And so when it comes to infrastructure, yeah, I mean Japan has less square mile land than we
Hmm.
have.
Right.
But that doesn't but if we're going to go by how many square miles of land you have based on infrastructure, okay, well, let's look at Canada. Canada has more area than we do, but they have a
Well,
lot
yeah.
less people.
Russia too.
Russia has the most, and they have a third of our population, a
Yeah.
half maybe.
Do you know they have an economy the size of Maryland that they don't actually like generate their own food?
Yeah, I was gonna say I was gonna say that I thought that their economy was equivalent to Texas, if I remember correctly.
Maybe.
That actually just came up in something I was reading. Yeah, so I mean, it's absolutely surprising then that when you look at the economy of all these other countries and then
Hmm.
our economy and our infrastructure is eighth in the world.
Right.
Oof.
It's
You know,
horrible. And we're well, and that's where jobs come from. You know what I mean?
there's so many ways in which you could build such different infrastructure that, like for example, everybody's making fun of Biden for the whole railway thing, and honestly, I think it's one of his better talking points because if you look at maglev systems for trains,
Hmm.
bullet trains, you know, there's no reason why there shouldn't be a maglev that runs up and down the East Coast,
Yeah.
in the megalopolis that is, everything from Baltimore to Boston. There's no reason why there shouldn't be, a bullet train that runs that far.
I
And
love it.
there's no reason why there shouldn't be a bullet train that runs up and down the entire East Coast or the entire West Coast. There should be a few bullet trains that run across the country. You
Hmm.
know, the the days of the old clackety clack railway car probably is going to be behind us eventually.
Yeah.
But I would not mind one bit jumping on a train and going back to Montana or riding across the country. Part of that, when you think about that Americana and nostalgia, the road trip was a fantastic thing.
Mm-hmm.
So, and so what, at one point the train trip was the fantastic thing. And I think that, in a modern sense, if you could bring back the train trip, it would be an absolutely fantastic thing to be able to do. Granted, you
Oh yeah.
probably you probably sleep from about Denver through, St. Louis because it is flatter than hell out there.
Well, but that's just it. It creates opportunities for infrastructure along the route. You know what I mean?
Well, and that's just one of those things is that, yeah, I think that there could be an absolutely unique venture to being able to take a maglev from places like that. You think about
Hmm.
what the pandemic has taught us is that people can live almost anywhere and work remote jobs from almost anywhere.
Right. My
You know,
only problem is that it's a Democrat idea, so therefore, fuck it. I don't like it. I instantly hate it.
and to me it should, Republicans should be jumping on that because what does that mean is that means more money is going to come to their state. But of course, Republicans aren't jumping on that idea because as we've seen lately, a bunch of them saying, "Don't move out here and vote stupid." Um,
Right.
what? So does that include voting for your dumbass? Because that's pretty stupid.
I I don't know. I don't know what Republicans stand for, and I'm perfectly okay with that. You know what I mean? I stand for what I do is I stand as close to the middle as possible, and I look at either side and I see what's going to benefit me, and then I go, woohoo! Like I told Adam, thank you to Joe Biden because I have a shot in my arm. Thank you to Donald Trump for starting the process. You know what I mean? So
Right.
there's thanks to go around, and I don't like Donald Trump, and I would rather have Joe Biden than Donald Trump, but I could tell you 14 other candidates I'd rather have than Joe Biden. So it's
Right.
not
Exactly.
it can't be about the person. You can love Jim Jordan from Ohio, but he has not gotten one policy passed for the constituents in his district, and at some point that should matter more than him just screaming like a used car salesman on the fucking Congress floor, you know?
But apparently there's a place for that, and I think that's in hell. But whatever. It's it's absolutely amazing to me just watching all of how people get absorbed into the rhetoric of people
Mm-hmm.
saying everything but then doing nothing.
Yeah, yeah.
We were promised so much, and in the end, none of that, hardly any of that came true.
Right.
I look at Donald Trump and I see all of the promises that he made. He was going to build a wall and make Mexico pay for it.
Yep.
Nope, that didn't happen. What did happen was is that he diverted funds from the Pentagon to build part of the wall
Yeah.
and then raised the tariffs on Mexico, so I ended up paying more at the grocery store.
Mm.
That definitely didn't work.
For your avocados.
Yeah, avocados
Yeah.
got real expensive there for a hot minute.
Not to mention the who knows the contractors that actually got the money. That was always my concern about the wall. Donald Trump is a guy that like you would call him a general contractor if you called him something. He likes to
Mhm.
build things and produce it. And so if he's building a wall, my question was who's going to decide who gets the contracts? Because that is just the slush fund that is the government paying $800 for a hammer, paying $1.5 million for a mile of wall, you know.
Exactly. And like anything that the government does, it's built by the lowest bidder.
Yeah.
So don't be fucking surprised, as we found out when sections of the wall fell over because of a breeze. you know,
Right. Wow.
to me, like if you were going to do anything with border security, it made far more sense to have the military involved in doing it. Why?
Mhm.
Because two things. Number one, the military's got a budget that, there's probably some things that they want to test out in terms of, you know, detection. Because,
Hell yeah.
the difference between what we're experiencing with Mexico versus what we experience in other countries is that when it comes to people crossing the border, being able to find and detect them and it is important,
Yeah,
because unfortunately what we've seen is the rise of people dropping off kids in the middle of fucking nowhere for borders and customs to come grab them, and that's just fucked up.
it is. But it's always been my view that the border should be a military, um, installation. It should be like 50 miles wide by 1,000 miles long, because nobody's going to be able to sneak through a bombing range. You can't dig a tunnel under a bombing range.
Well, I
But
mean, you could, but you got a death
yeah,
wish.
but I also believe that that should be a place to train with Canadian and Mexican and Colombian and Brazilian forces, so that we can unify our strategy in the region. And that's why I feel like we don't need a border. We need something built on the border. We need infrastructure along the border, but I don't think a wall is what
a,
keeps
a
what's the
border a border wall doesn't fix anything, because once
right.
again you have to go back to the root problem of why people are trying to get across the border.
Sure.
And until you fix those root causes,
Mm-hmm.
all you're doing is just prolonging human suffering for the most part, and just trying to win points with different groups of people, like, oh, look how humane we are, and
Yeah.
in accepting these people and putting them into overflow facilities.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, boy. I gotta give the Democrats a real pat on the back for that fucking rewording. That was special.
I don't know if there's a solution to it right now.
No, there's not a great solution to it right now, but there are options. And those options are to actually invest in our neighbors,
Mm-hmm.
so that way there are better jobs that
Shortening our supply chains.
that shorten our supply chains,
Mm-hmm.
that create stability and investment opportunities, that put people to work in long-term stable positions
Right.
that have a lot less risk. Sure, there's a lot of money in running drugs across the border, absolutely. But when you tell somebody, hey, you can make a lot of money running drugs across the border, or you could make, a bit less, but your job's not going to go away, people are
Right.
going to be like, well, what else comes with that? Because they're going to want to hear that option, and when they find out that there's benefits like, healthcare for their kids, or investment opportunities in their retirement, or
Sure.
any number of things that actually create a stable environment, they're going to go off for that,
Sure. And
because
I think
the risk of sitting in jail for the rest of your life, not being able to take care of your family,
right.
is not nearly as appealing as working a job where you're not going to have to worry about whether or not you're going to be able to afford your next meal, because you're in another country, or in another country's jail.
Sure. And I think if you offer legalization, if marijuana becomes a commodity like avocados, then you weaken the cartel simply by saying it's legal, start legally producing it for us. And suddenly you take our enemy and you make them an ally that suddenly wants to invest and protect the land that they were looting and destroying.
Absolutely, and that's just so, until we start actually like trying to invest in and
Hmm.
work with our neighbors, all we're going to do is just keep making the same mistakes. The war on drugs has definitely not gone well. And so now you're starting to see people be like, you know what? Screw this. We're just going to legalize it. We're
Yeah.
just going to tax the hell out of it. And we're going to treat it like a public health crisis.
Well, it did work well for, like, I would say, entities involved in law enforcement that got a bloated budget to deal with it. You
Oh,
know what I
absolutely.
mean? It worked.
It
Yeah.
militarized a lot of law enforcement.
But if you're looking for, like, the holes in the sieve of money that is government, yeah, that's something you could plug up instantly. You know what I mean?
Seriously, if you take the budget that's now going towards like all of this
Yeah.
advanced policing, and then put
Right.
it towards like actual,
Anything.
public health, you
Anything.
know,
Yeah.
you probably have a better chance of treating the public health issue than you have the war on drugs, because
Yeah.
let's face it, we didn't exactly win Afghanistan. Iraq's been kind of a shit show, and drugs, well, we've been fighting drugs longer than Afghanistan and Iraq, and that's kicking our ass.
Well, let's be honest. A lot of Afghanistan was drugs. It was poppies. It was, I mean, that's where
Hmm.
bin Laden got a majority of his money,
Absolutely.
along with mineral rights. So we're fighting to take the land for the mineral rights, but we're taking it because there's poppies on it. And we also want that for our pharmaceuticals. Like that
Mhm.
opium has to come from somewhere to be a derivative that goes into
Right.
your pill that keeps you addicted. So I don't know. But
Well,
yes, that would plug up a lot of the holes if we just stopped fighting drugs and gave people the freedom of choice. I mean, I'm sorry if you I think you have
like
the right. I just think you have the right. You might die, and I'm really sorry about that
like
for
that,
doing drugs, but you
and
can't
that's
prevent it.
and that's just it. Is that what is what has this done? Is it's created a black market of drugs.
Hmm.
It's always that, it always comes back to that same discussion of, you can ban anything that you want, but then it creates a black market, and that black market is usually inhabited by a lot of dangerous ideologies and dangerous practices.
Right, but that gives us the chance to create a budget to fight that stuff. We create our enemies so that we can use the money to fake fight it. You know what I mean?
Right, exactly. But if you remove that black market by, say legalizing drugs, not only does it make it harder for the cartel to make any money, number one, but number two, what you actually then have is a way to invest in public health. And by investing in public health, you now have a better way to fight things like the opioid crisis. The opioid crisis was something that, I mean, let's be realistic here. That was pushed by big pharma, and the ability to push pills to anybody at any time, how much ever. I mean, I could walk into my doctor's office for a while there at any time, and just because my shoulder was hurting, it was so easy for me to be like, "Oh, hey, I'm really experiencing some shoulder pain." They're like, "All right, here's a list of opioids. How much do you want? Do you want a month's supply, a year's supply, a 10-year supply? Do you want to be able to take 10 years at once?" And it's like, no, I don't. I don't want 10 years worth of opioids. But when it comes down to it, is that some people are like, well, this is cheaper than being able to not afford surgery, and so I'm
Hmm.
just going to go this route. And
Yeah,
then voila, you have a bunch of people that are addicted to opioids, and then all of a sudden everybody panics because these things are just like going crazy.
yeah,
They're just disappearing off shelves like hotcakes, and then they are like, oh no, we're going to cut off the supply. So you got a bunch of people who are addicted to opioids that now have no supply of opioids, and then they have no choice but to turn to the black market, which is either going to be pills that have been stolen, to people making their own shit, which basically was just heroin
yeah, yeah.
or fentanyl. Jesus Christ, fentanyl.
So
They literally parse that stuff out into millions of grams, because that's how potent that shit is.
yeah, but I mean, you create the issue by not funding a healthcare system, and then you create a market, and then you advertise it as the solution to the problem. What did they think was going to happen? They led people to the pills by leading them away from proper healthcare.
Meanwhile, states that have legalized marijuana have seen their opioid addiction rates absolutely plummet.
Yeah, I believe that. I believe that.
So I find it very hilarious that, uh, and convenient that suddenly all of this information is coming out about how marijuana could be used to fight the opioid addiction.
Mm.
So
Opioids are horrible, but I
it
don't know.
is.
I mean, so that's just, I mean, and I don't hear any politicians talking in this language, like out in the public. It's all just always the scream, hate the other guy, and it kind of
It's
bugs me.
all about sound bites. It's all
Right.
about making sure that you get that 15-second clip of owning the Republicans or owning the libs, and it's like, oh, he said something, and this person made him regret it. Did they actually? Like, I hate this fucking logic. Like, you see, Jim Jordan opened his mouth and this person made him instantly regret it. I don't think Jim Jordan is capable of regretting any fucking thing that he has ever said. Period. End of story. And there is no way that any person that has ever owned his ass in an actual argument has made him think, you know what, maybe I should sit down and shut the fuck up. That has not
Right.
happened, and people need to stop it with this line of bullshit.
Yeah.
Nobody is getting owned except for the American people listening to this and going, "Yeah, we're doing it," patting ourselves on the back and accomplishing fucking nothing.
Right. And I only laugh at that because it was Jim Jordan yelling at Val Demings, a 25-year veteran of the police force, on
Hmm.
policing, and he's a used car salesman that doesn't know how to wear a jacket from Ohio. And it was like, not only are you a white man yelling at a black woman, you have no qualifications to be yelling at this person with all of these qualifications. And it was just like, he just was like, oh, well, you said this about us. And it was like, it doesn't matter. She used the word is instead of are, or something like that. She wasn't attacking you. We have to get past that, where we're just listening for the chance to jump in and yell at somebody, and start listening and start criticizing them for their policies, or for their policies. Like we said about Joe Biden, he wishes. And what I wish is that Democrats said, look what we did. You know what I mean? Like, I think we're so ready to jump that we know the answer, but we don't want to take the time or the effort to put in the steps to get there. I always say it's that staircase. Life is a staircase. It takes step 1 through 5 to get to the top, but we're all looking at the top going, yes, that's what we need for reform. But then we're not, and we think we can yell our way there. And it's not.
Hmm.
It's these little conversations that get had by us to them, and then them among each other. It's not them trying to figure it out, because I've never been asked a question by a politician. I've never been polled. I've never been asked anything. You know what I mean? So they're not talking to me. I should be talking to them.
And that's the reality is that
Hmm.
nobody's talking to us about, what we want. Nobody's coming to us and saying, hey, what would make your life easier? What regulation could we add that would make your life easier? What regulation could we remove that would make your
Hmm.
life easier? Nobody's coming to us, the people, about this. They're going to the corporations, absolutely. They're
Oh
like,
yeah.
hey, so how much money are you willing to shell out to get rid of this regulation? And that's
Right.
absolutely the case. That absolutely is happening. But in terms of your everyday person, nobody's coming to us and saying, hey, so you've been on our welfare system for a while. What could we do to help you actually get off of the system? like
Right.
like not pull the rug out from under you, but get you to where you are, able to sustain yourself. What could we do there? Nobody's coming up and asking anybody about that stuff.
That's the problem, right? They're not meeting sex workers and saying, what can we do to make this less of a problem? You know what I mean? Like, you want to decriminalize it. You don't want to legalize it. No sex worker wants it legalized. They just want it decriminalized, and they want to be able to pay their taxes and not be in fear of the law. They want access to health insurance, and they want that kind of stuff, but they don't want you um, overreaching and regulating it. You know what I
Right.
mean?
And that's respectable. And that, the idea that a government is going to be able to tell a person what to do with their body is absolutely hilarious to me.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, like when you look at the argument for decriminalizing sex work versus legalizing sex work, decriminalizing it only means that we're just not going to arrest you. We still aren't going to give you the access and the means to
Right.
be able to deposit funds, to be able to use that money to be able to do anything else. Whereas if you legalize it, now you open them up to be able to have their own business licenses, have their own place where they might do the sort of the sex work that they do,
Mm.
and be able to access banking, be able to access loans if they want to do anything like that. Like basically, if somebody actually wanted to have their own business,
Mm-hmm.
decriminalizing it isn't enough.
Okay. Well,
Now, if it
it's a discussion to be had, is my point. You know what I mean?
absolutely, absolutely, and they're all I can speak to is the business side of it. The
Yeah.
business side of decriminalization versus legalization is far different.
Well, we're seeing that in marijuana right now.
Exactly, because the states have decriminalized it, but it's and quote unquote legalized it, but because the feds haven't legalized it, there's still no access to banking for
Right.
these places, and that in and of itself is stupid and dangerous. If you want people to be able to see the light of day, you have to make things legal in the sense that they're going to be able to report, they're going to be able to access funds, they're going to have to. I mean, you've already got everything else in place except for the word go.
Right.
In terms of marijuana, sex work is, far and away a long ways away from that.
Yeah. Well, one state, and I want to say it's Vermont, just decriminalized sex work. So I don't know, but that's a real broad term, and
Hmm. It
I don't,
absolutely is.
I was trying to think of a term, and I like intimacy coordinator. Yeah.
Intimacy. I'm sure Debbie has a better, probably a better definition for different varieties of sex work,
Well, yeah.
because they're Debbie's like, I have entered the
Hmm.
chat.
Yeah,
This might be another one of those where I have to.
you can tell her to get her computer ready. I'm fine with that too.
Debbie has the best question. What do you mean by different varieties of sex work? Are we talking camming? Are we talking,
Exactly.
are we talking prostitution
There's that
or
too.
escorts? What are we talking about here?
Exactly. That's the thing.
Sex work is sex work, and that very much, I think that's really probably the. You know what? I'm just gonna.
I love these.
This
These are
is
my
I'm I am
favorites.
I am I am in over my head. I'm in over my head, and there are smarter people than I that know this topic.
Yeah, but I'm always stuck as the one idiot that has to be here.
Hello.
Hi, we were just talking about decriminalization or legalization
Yeah.
of sex work. And then I
Yeah.
was like, there is varieties to sex work. It's an umbrella, you know what I
Well,
mean?
yeah, I mean, sex work is sex work, right? Like
Right.
unfortunately, some sex work is considered more okay than others. Like,
Exactly.
so like for me, I'm like, what it really is the difference between making porn and getting paid for it
Hmm.
and like hiring a sex worker to have sex with you on a one-on-one basis. There
Right.
really isn't a difference. Um,
In the
except one is
actions.
good for consumers and the other one is like good for individuals.
Sure.
So, but one of them is legal and one of them is not. And it's I think it's utter bullshit. If we legalized and decriminalized all sex work,
Yes.
A,
Yes.
there would be tax revenue. B,
Yes.
you would have better protections for sex workers. And you would be able to get rid of like creepy abusive johns, for the most
Yes.
part, because there would be no more like creepy abusive pimps and things like that. Like,
That's
okay,
right.
maybe not no more, but that would be there would be protections there. It would be like, you would have that ability to like report when your boss was being abusive and creepy.
Hmm.
You would have like L&I claims available for things like
Access
that.
to healthcare, bank accounts,
Absolutely. And
all of that, which is
it
important.
works in Nevada. It works really well for those people that want to do
Hmm.
any sex work. They are able to get healthcare. They're like regular STI screenings and things like that.
Which we want.
Um, yeah, absolutely. I just think it's like such bullshit that there's this hierarchy of sex work, like the things that we find okay
I
versus the things
agree.
that we don't find okay.
Yeah.
So, and there would be so much more ability for people to um protect themselves in those situations. We would reduce trafficking in
Hmm.
in so many ways. I just don't understand why we don't do it.
Oh yeah. I don't think I was trying to separate them morally. I was just
Right.
saying, I was trying to drill down on one category of it, and
Hmm.
I was saying that sex workers, I prefer the term intimacy coordinator.
Uh,
You know what I mean? Because
yeah, sure.
I lived with an escort, and she was like, I
Yeah.
don't know if escort is quite it. Sex worker is a term
Hmm.
that I like better, but then
Yeah.
after 3 months, she was like, I'm not quite sure I like the term sex worker either. And so that's where, I'm coming from
Right.
speaking to people
Hmm.
in the business,
Yeah.
and they're my friends, and I would love
Right.
if they were protected better, honest to God,
Absolutely.
you
Well, I
know?
mean, I've done sex work. I was a cam person.
Right.
And I would say like intimacy is such a it's a interesting word because like what what each individual considers intimacy is different.
Mhm. Exactly.
And like you don't always have to have intimacy to have sex.
Sometimes you don't
Which
need to have sex to have all the intimacy you want.
exactly. And a lot of times, really, honestly, when I was doing sex work, most of it was had nothing to do with sex. It was
Right.
people who wanted to talk. Like, okay,
Yep.
yeah, I would take my shirt off or whatever, but a lot of times, like sex work, people just want to watch you do something. They want to feel close to you,
Yeah.
and they need that connection with another human, which is
Mm-hmm.
why like a lot of people pay really good money for camming versus doing porn. Like they want that one-on-one connection with a person.
Right.
And that's the closest to uh what they would call like escorting or what they used to call prostitution,
Mhm.
which I
Right.
I don't like that word, but
Nobody likes it. Has an illegal connotation that we don't have to use.
absolutely, absolutely. But like that's the closest thing that people can get without having
Mhm.
to do this illegally. And so it's like, okay, well the closest you can get is basically a Zoom call with somebody who takes their clothes off, you know?
Sure. Sure. But
Um
that's morally okay for some reason, but meeting the person in person isn't, you know?
exactly. That's where it I find it really like disturbing. I guess there's like a
Yeah.
degree of separation and protection there. But at
Mhm.
the same time, like if you want to get close to somebody in real life, like
Exactly.
you have to understand that there's risk involved in that. And that unfortunately, until we decriminalize and legalize sex work in general,
Yeah.
we're not going to be able to have that protection for people.
And a big part of that is it's harder to educate the consumer
Right.
if it's unregulated like that. And
Right.
what I keep thinking when we talk about any of these jobs in the
Mhm.
industry is the lack of understanding of boundaries by its consumer.
Mhm.
And that's what causes all of the issues, and
Yeah.
the morals that divide an
Yeah.
OnlyFans acceptable from a prostitution that isn't. You know what I mean? But
Well,
the consumer,
yeah.
we're protecting the provider from the consumer because the
Mhm.
consumer isn't able to be educated properly on what a boundary is.
Right. Well, so if you look at like the history of sex work,
Hmm.
I and the I what I believe the reason is that they made it illegal because it wasn't always illegal. Was that women made more money than men.
That's a big part of it, I'm sure.
Especially if you look at like the history of a lot of cities, like specifically Seattle.
Hmm.
If you've ever gone on the Seattle Underground tour, they actually talk about this, and they they didn't have a way to tax it because it wasn't illegal, but it also wasn't a legal job, right? So
Right, right.
when they've realized that all these seamstresses were making far more money than any of the men
Hmm.
in Seattle, all of a sudden that became a problem and sex work became illegal.
And all the men, by the way, knew they were doing it because they're
Yeah,
the consumers, right? A
exactly.
majority of them are the consumer.
Right. Well, and like maybe they had this idea that like, oh, it wasn't very many people because people didn't
Right.
talk about sex a lot. But the fact that it became illegal not on a like moral standing, but because men were had this inferiority complex to the fact that women were making more money than them.
Of
Like,
course
are
they
you
did.
kidding me? Are you kidding me? Like,
That's a major aspect of it, but I think
oh,
the morality of it all, like they can't
oh,
see
it
that
became a moral thing. Yeah,
they can't
absolutely.
see the provider as not their daughter or their niece or their,
Mhm.
you know, because a man has that white knight syndrome, like, oh, I have to protect every woman from the treacheries of other men
Right.
as they project abominations upon the people they're trying to protect, you know.
Well, but what I find interesting is they've done studies that when men look at an object and like they're studying their brains,
Hmm.
when they are looking at an object and then they look at a woman in a sexual way, their brain sees them as an object in the
Yeah.
same way as they were looking at like a teapot.
Yeah.
So like, but when they look at like a person, any person in a not sexual way, they see them as a human. So it lights up different parts of their brain.
I
And
wish
that is fascinating to me.
I wish that was true because I have a theory that a man looks at a woman and says, "What part of that is mine?" and
Yes,
and
absolutely.
and then gets disappointed in the less that he discovers is
Hmm.
his until it's nothing. And we need
Right,
to realize that when we see somebody, nothing is yours, nothing about that
right.
person. They haven't been thinking about you, they don't
Hmm.
give a thought about you, they don't give a shit about you, they're just going on about their day. They're not
Right.
going, oh my god, finally after all my life I get to see
Hmm.
Jason and give him what he deserves. That's not what they're saying.
Right. Well, this is why I fully believe in like kind of dismantling this idea of a romantic relationship with somebody like being more important than a friendship, right? Like you look at,
Right.
you're like, oh, but we're just friends. When somebody's like, oh, are
Yeah.
you dating? No, we're just friends. Like, okay, so you're like creating this idea that like a romantic relationship is more important than a friendship, which isn't
Right.
true. Like if you're not friends with your partner, like what even are you? Like you just
Yeah.
get, bonus naked time. Like, and not everybody wants that either.
Yeah.
um,
um,
so
Definition causes expectations. So if
yeah,
I say this person's my girlfriend, suddenly we're going to start treating each other like we're boyfriend and girlfriend as we perceive that definition to be.
yeah,
When you leave it ambiguous and say, we're just seeing where it goes,
right.
then it leaves it open to everything. Like when
Hmm.
I meet a girl we're talking, I get a feeling. When I have a chance to hold her hand, that's an exciting feeling. And then
Yeah,
when I get a chance to lean over and kiss her cheek or something, or
yeah.
stare at her eyes, that's exciting too. We don't need to
Hmm.
bypass all of that because we
Right.
suddenly defined it as something else.
Well, and like, what's wrong with doing that with somebody who you're also friends with? Like,
That's
why can't
right.
you hold hands with your friends? Why can't you kiss your friends? Like, why have
Right.
we created that boundary around that? And so, like, bodily autonomy in relationships is really interesting because, like,
Hmm.
what you when you define a relationship, you call them my boyfriend or my girlfriend as if you have some sort of
Right.
ownership over them.
Yeah.
And
Right.
I wish there was a different way to describe that because like especially
Hmm.
I'm like a polyamorous person, so I am like, oh yeah, but like I have and there's my boyfriend and my girlfriend and like I do I own like a harem? No, I don't. Like
Right.
I just have different relationships with them and you have to define what that relationship looks like because society looks at it and they're like, but wait,
Right.
you
But you
have
don't
this.
really need to define it.
Yeah. No. And like it's my decision to decide what I do with my body and it's my partner's decision to decide what they do with their body and we have conversations about it.
Hmm.
Not the, like it's that's a whole nother thing, but
Yeah,
that
yeah,
goes
yeah.
along the lines of like ownership and like how we see people
And
and
foreplay.
mhm, right? But like
That's how you
I
and
have I have lots of friends that I like cuddle with and have intimate moments with without any sex or anything involved. Does that
right.
make them more than a friend? Like we're getting into that gray area,
Well,
there.
that's where we need to start living. I have friends that I have had awkward sex with that have gone on to be some of my best friends.
Right?
Because I realized, oh, we're not sexual partners. That's not going to work, but you're an amazing person and I was drawn to
Yeah,
you for a reason, so I want to keep you in my
absolutely.
life. As well as
Right.
there's friends that I have that I'm like, I really wonder, but I don't push
Mhm.
that because I don't want to.
No.
I like things to be how they are and how they're supposed to be, and I don't want to be the one that looks back and says, "Oh, I pushed for an agenda," you know.
Right. Well, and that's where a good conversation comes into play. And
Hmm.
like considering your own feelings about like partnerships. Like, what do I
Yeah.
want? Like, can I maintain multiple partnerships with people? Is that going to be something that works for me? How do I
Mm,
explain that to new people that I want to date? Like, hey, yes,
right.
I'm in a relationship with this person and this person, but they are both okay with me seeing other people as well. Like, how does that feel to you? Like,
Yeah.
feeling people out and just talking about it and being open and like that love is not a finite resource, right?
It shouldn't be, but I think part of it is what are you willing to offer, and then you have
Mhm.
what is the person you're talking to have to offer, and then
Mhm.
is that something you can accept, and then you go
Absolutely.
from there. And it when you hide things that you want that you don't think others will approve of, and
Right.
that's a major issue with relationships, is that
Absolutely.
men go on wanting more but communicating less, and then
Mhm.
resenting the other person because they're not
They're
living
getting
up to the standards that they're not telling them they're
because
supposed to live
somebody
up to.
can't read their mind, right?
Right, right.
Yeah.
And
Well, and I think that's
how
why
many
so
times
many relationships fail is
that's
because
why,
people
yes.
people put up this when you date somebody, right? When you go
Mm-hmm.
on a date, you put on your best face. You
Right.
only show them the good stuff. And then you apologize when you have a bad day and you bitch about something. I never apologize. I never apologize for that. And I always tell people, you're allowed to have a bad day,
That's right. Yeah.
And I like you more when I can see your bad side. When somebody hides
Yes.
that from me, that's a big red flag. It's a
Yeah,
big red flag for
you
me.
don't know anybody till you fought with them. You
Exactly.
can't be in a committed relationship with somebody that you've never fought with.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous. You know,
Yeah.
I've seen couples together and I hear we've never fought. Then you're just hiding everything from each other. You're not actually being
Uh-huh.
honest about anything,
Yeah, exactly.
which means you're
You're
settling.
building resentment.
Yes, so that you can use it later.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Because it gives you an excuse to leave somebody.
Yeah.
And but that's where people get blindsided in
Mm-hmm.
like relationships. They get blindsided because somebody leaves them when they could have easily just communicated about the thing that bothered them and moved
Yeah.
on from it.
Why did
And
he cheat on me with her? Because she
right.
does something I didn't do, but he never asked me to do it. I hear that all
Mhm.
the time. Like, if he wanted more sex, we could have. I want more sex too. We just didn't have the discussion
Mm.
to get to that point. You know what I mean?
Well, for me, it's like the cheating, like the sex part, that's not the part that bothers me. It's the lying part.
It's the lying part.
It's always the lying part. So,
Right.
like, why do we lie to ourselves and to our partners when we
Mm-hmm.
want to have sex with other people? We're animals. Like we're wired to want to mate with people
Yeah.
in some way. Not everybody, of course. There's all sorts of like asexual and aromantic folks out there, but
Yeah.
um physiologically speaking, like we're attracted to more than one person. Why do we lie to ourselves about that when we get into a relationship?
It's just how you.
Monogamy is, I have a problem with monogamy in the fact that like it was created out of a sense of ownership, specifically of ownership of women in like a
Right.
trade value situation. And
Sure.
like I can't live inside of that box because I've evaluated myself and I'm like, okay, it's not the sex part that bothers me. So my partner can have sex with whoever they want. It's the lying and the sneaking and the like weirdness there. So if
Mm.
we remove the lying and the sneaking, we just talk about it and I allow my partners to do whoever they want to do
Right.
and talk to me about it, then we can all be happier for it. And we
Yeah.
can all be more enriched for it because no one person is so there's two types of relationships that you can get into in my opinion. You can get into a polyamorous relationship where you date multiple people, love multiple people, have sex or don't have sex with multiple people, create and cultivate relationships with multiple people that feel intimate,
Mm-hmm.
that feel like more than friendship, and get all those different parts of you fulfilled with multiple people. Or you can settle.
Well,
You can
yeah.
settle for somebody and round them up to the 100% of what you need out of another person.
A
And
project, so you're constantly disappointed in him.
well, yeah, and that's how I feel about monogamy. And not, it doesn't, monogamy works for some people. They find somebody that's so close to their 100% that they're willing to not date other people. They're willing to deny their like, attraction to
Sure.
other people to be with that person. And that works for some people.
I was with a woman, I tell you, and she was so perfect that I didn't even think about anybody else on a
Yeah,
minute to minute basis. I was so amazed by her.
that's
I, c- I could
incredible.
I couldn't get enough. But I was also in a relationship, and the girl said, "Well, I'm seeing three other people,
Yeah.
so I'm in an open relationship." And I said, "No, you're not in a relationship, and that's
Hmm.
fine too. But
Right.
don't define us as a relationship. You know what I mean? Until we've
Hmm.
defined what a relationship is, you
Well,
know."
yeah, and I think each relationship can be different. So, like,
Right,
like
exactly.
h- let people know, like, hey, I'm dating other people, and also I want a serious relationship with multiple people. But
Yeah,
you have to talk about that with each person that you're dating. Like, you
and
have to
yeah,
create that boundary and those expectations of what you want out of your relationship.
yeah.
And it can be different for every single person, and that's what I find really interesting.
But you know what I think? I think we need to practice more making friends than we need
Yeah.
to search for a partner. Like I think I realize that trying to make friends is more beneficial to me than actually trying to find a woman to sleep with, and
Right.
they don't know quite how to. I just made a friend because
Uh-huh.
she loves metal. I just made
Yeah.
another friend from. She lives in Florida, from Sweden. She has two kids. We have nothing in common, but I just started talking to her, and I
Sure.
told her, I'm not a creep. I like conversation. If you want to talk, I'm here to talk. And we
Right.
talk.
Well,
And it's cool to have these
yeah.
friends without the pursuing of a relationship before we even know each other.
Mhm.
I'm not determining that I want to have sex with somebody that I don't
Right.
even know, But that's the
Mhm.
demisexual portion of me. It's the ties,
Right.
it's the knowing somebody that makes me. There's going to be something
Yeah.
about everybody, and I'm like, oh, I like that about you that I
Right.
didn't like in somebody else. So
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and like that's your definition of a relationship with somebody, right? Your
mhm.
definition of building a relationship is it includes like a sexuality in some way,
Yeah,
whereas like that where you defined your friendship is like, okay, there's no sex involved,
there's
you
not a
know,
sexual component to a
and
friendship,
I
right?
have friendships where I have had sex with these people and would
Oh
continue
yeah.
to have sex with those people, but I
Oh yeah.
wouldn't define that as a relationship where I am like, dating them,
Exactly.
right?
Exactly.
Like,
But
oh, it's like occasionally, yeah, like we, have a good time. We're compatible in that way, but we don't want to like meld our
yeah,
lives in some way that
I just
makes it serious.
I think men have this, maybe not all men, but I think there's this line where like we're friends. There's a chance for sex. Ugh. And we lose our objectivity and we go for the
Mm,
prize as opposed to knowing that we had it. We
mm.
have a friend.
That's interesting that you say go for the prize.
Like, well, we see it differently. I think they're trying to get
I
laid simply
think,
for the fact of to know that they can still get laid, instead
uh-huh.
of finding intimacy
Uh,
for the connection. And I think
I
that's a big issue.
yeah, I find that to be interesting because I think that men are socialized to believe that sex is a scarce resource, and it's
Right.
just not. It simply is not. Women love to have sex. We actually can have more orgasms than men during sex
Hell
for the
yeah.
most part.
They
But
better. They better.
yeah, it better happen. Rude
Right.
if it doesn't. Like,
Right.
yeah,
But
I get to go first. Thanks.
that's not the point. Is we've men have been trained to get into bed with the woman, and then
Right.
after that, that's the finish line. Not pleasing her, not
Yeah.
continuing a
Yeah.
conversation or building something together. It's just get her into bed, and
Get
I
her
don't
into
know,
bed, and I
I
get
don't
to
know
get
what's,
off, and
and then
that's all that matters.
I get to mark my headboard with one more, and then
Right.
I know that, hey, I can still get laid. Oh no,
Right.
can I get laid now that it's the next day? I better find out. Instead of going, I got like 8 great friends and one of them wants to be affectionate today. You know what
Yeah.
I mean?
Yeah, exactly. Like it's the thing is like you have to fight against the idea that like sex is scarce and difficult to
Right.
get.
Or the goal.
Maybe if you're a good person and maybe if you're not an asshole after somebody has sex with you, then
Right.
you're going to get more sex. Like the reason that you're not getting laid is because you had sex, you got awkward, and then you stopped texting me.
Right.
Like
Right.
maybe it's not it doesn't have to be that way. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and you don't have to like have this expectation of a relationship, because
Yeah.
I found in my experience that men get more clingy than women do after
Hmm.
having sex.
Yeah, they start getting jealous and possessive and thinking somebody else is going to get it as soon as it walks away.
And maybe they will, but maybe
Maybe they
they'll,
will, right? But you
you
don't
know,
own it. You
that's
don't own it to begin with. That's the thing.
exactly. You don't own that person's autonomy with their
Right.
sexuality. Nobody does, even when you're in a relationship. And that's why so many people cheat. It's like they
Hmm.
need autonomy.
Hmm.
And it has really nothing to do with you and hurting your feelings, and everything to do with like maybe you're smothering that person.
Yeah.
Maybe that's why they're cheating on you. Or maybe you make them sad. Or maybe you're not pleasing them in bed because you're a selfish lover and you don't do anything to make sure that your
Right.
partner gets off. Like sex is not just a take, it's a give and take.
That's right. But it's the lack of communication in all of those scenarios that leads to it.
Yeah, I talked to somebody, I won't name any names, recently, who I had a relationship with, well, before, and um like they have a partner, and they we were having just a conversation. We were just talking, and they were like, "Oh, I gotta go. My partner is calling me." And I
Mm.
was like, "Oh, do they not know that you're talking to me?" And they were like, no." And I was like, "Ew." And
Ew.
they were like, "Well, it doesn't that make it more exciting?" I was like, "Absolutely not.
Mm-mm.
My human, you know." I'm like,
Hurting
"Uh-uh."
somebody else?
Yeah, I was like, yeah, that doesn't make me feel comfortable. Like, we're literally just having a conversation as friends. Like that, yeah, you're gonna get in trouble for that.
Right.
Maybe it's better if we just don't talk, you know?
I'm down here on level 1 and you're treating me like a level 3 while the level 5 you have doesn't know about it.
Exactly. Like, what the hell?
Yeah.
See, you don't have to do that. Like, maybe if you just talked to your partner and said, "Hey, this is
Hmm.
my friend. I'm just
Yeah.
having a conversation with a friend."
Yeah.
Like, ugh, ugh. And maybe if that your partner makes those boundaries and you don't like it, maybe you're not compatible, you know?
That's right. But if your partner comes to you and says something like I'm interested in somebody else, you have to realize
Hmm.
it's not a knock on you. It's something
Right.
they're going through, not something you're going through.
Yeah, exactly. And like jealousy is normal. Jealousy is normal,
Hmm.
but
Yeah.
you have to understand why you have the feelings of jealousy.
Mm.
So, where does the jealousy stem from? Is it because you wanted to do that activity with another person? Is it because
Yep.
you feel hurt that they're spending more time with this other person? Is it because the relationship energy is different? Like, what is it that makes you jealous?
Right.
It's jealousy is not like the end all be all. The reason that you
Yeah.
have jealousy is for some other matter. It's a secondary emotion to something else.
Right. I call it a roller coaster. Every emotion is a roller coaster, and jealousy is the one that you can control the best, you know?
Yeah. Well, and that's the biggest part, especially like in polyamory, is the people are like, "Oh, are you not jealous?" I'm like, "Nah, I get jealous.
Right.
I just have to work through that and make myself a better person and understand myself better." And some people
Hmm.
don't want to do that work. They just go, "Well,
Right.
I'm not a jealous person." I'm like, "Well, that's great, but like there's going to come a time when you feel that jealousy and it's going to fuck with you."
Right. I have a hard time with jealousy in romance that way, but
Mhm.
I will pick somebody and say I'm jealous of that person. That way they know I have the
Mhm.
ability. But I had a friend and we had a loose relationship, and she found a boyfriend and she's like, "Why are you so jealous?" And I was like, "I'm not jealous of what you're doing together. I'm jealous of the time it takes away from us."
Yeah.
And she didn't believe me, and I was like, "It's not that. Go have your boyfriend, but I still want to be your friend. Like I still
Yeah.
we started out this way, and the downgrade kind of sucks, but then I also got to be there afterwards to be her
Mhm.
friend because I stayed a true friend instead of saying, "Wah." I was like,
Right.
we got to communicate and talk it through so we both knew where we were coming from. And
Absolutely.
that continued a friendship that continues on to this day that could have been lost forever because of I didn't know I didn't understand what I was feeling
Yeah.
until I talked it out. It came out like wah wah wah, but it ended up with, I really like you as a friend and I'd like to spend more time doing that,
Right. It's like ever since you started seeing this person, I feel like I haven't been able to spend as much time with you as I would like. And
Right,
that makes me feel jealousy, not that I want to fuck you, but
right.
that I want to be your friend, you
And
know?
that should feel good.
Well, that happens a lot sometimes in like my friendships. I have some friends who like once they get in a relationship, they just don't come around anymore. They are so
Yeah,
involved in the relationship and pleasing that other person that
right.
they forget that they have any friends. And I'm like, okay, well,
But
I just know that about you.
that's not forever. That's a nesting period. Once they
Absolutely.
get comfortable, they start
Uh-huh.
expanding. Everybody thinks that
Absolutely.
today is forever, and they don't realize that today is just a chance for a conversation that will last,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Exactly. Well, and like everybody goes through this, what in the poly community we call NRE or new relationship energy. Like you get
Right.
really excited and you want to spend all your time with that person, and
Hmm.
it's like a bonding thing, right? Like
Yeah.
you do it accidentally. Your brain is like, "Oh my God, I'm so excited about this person," woo," and it, like fritzes everything out, and then you ignore all the people around you because you're so focused on this one thing. And you have to
Right.
remember at the beginning of any like friendship or relationship or partnership that like there's other people that you love around you that you're
Yeah.
ignoring because of this, and you have to be sensitive to that.
Well, are you nesting so that you can learn about the other person, or are you nesting because you don't want them to learn something about anybody else but you?
Right, right. You're like taking up all their time because you want to like secure it, you know?
Right, and that's an issue.
Well, and I think that's yeah, unhealthy. Like you have to
Well,
allow
that
them
is.
still to be themselves and have their time and like when you're feeling sad about not seeing them, just tell them, you know? Just
That
say,
just
"Hey,
tell them.
like
But but
I just
but don't
want to
accuse
spend a lot of time with you, but it's not your fault. I know you're a busy person, right?"
right. Don't accuse them of doing something wrong. Just let them know that
Mhm.
how you're feeling is your feeling.
Exactly. This is my feeling and I own it. It's not your responsibility.
That's a great way to bring it up. This is my feeling and I own it. I'd like to discuss it with you.
Yes.
I
I'm
don't
not blaming my feeling on you. I'm telling you I'm having a feeling about
right.
you. And
Yeah,
like having that kind of like ownership of your feelings and not making other people responsible for them is a healthy adult thing to do
I
because
like that.
nobody is responsible for your feelings but you. Like recently at work, I had somebody
Ooh,
say, "Well, do you not like this person? This person thinks that you don't like them." I was like, "That's their feeling and not mine, and I'm not responsible for that. I never said I didn't like them.
that's
I
right.
just don't know them yet, and I am awkward and I'm autistic and I come off as really like flat and straightforward and like
Blunt.
monotone and
Right,
blunt.
right.
Yeah. And so people will take that as like me not liking them, but that's who I am as a person. And it's not my responsibility to manage your feelings about
Yeah,
that. You
yeah,
know, I'm like,
yeah.
once you get to know me, I'm like one of the like nicest people you'll ever meet until you cross me. But, you know, like,
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, well, no, that's not my responsibility to like deal with that feeling that they're having. They could
I,
talk to me about it and say,
I,
"Hey, do you have an issue? Did I say something wrong?" And I would
right.
very easily explain, "No, no, not at all. I'm just the type of person who doesn't come across as like, you know, friendly all the time."
But is there a point in a friendship when you do have some responsibility for somebody else's emotion that isn't yours?
I don't think that it's your responsibility. I think that you have you never have an obligation to like police other people's feelings or take care of other people's feelings. But if somebody comes to you and says that they have a feeling about something that
Right.
involves you, then it
Right.
does become your responsibility to help them work through that
If they're a
and
friend.
explain exactly and
Okay.
explain like, "Hey, you said this thing and it hurt my feelings." Like, okay, let me take
Right.
ownership of that thing and explain what I meant. and then
Right.
you work through it together. But they have to work on their own feelings about it, because people miscommunicate all the time.
Of
And you
course.
you also have to work on your communication with each individual person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you hold it in, you have the conversation by yourself, and when you
Mhm.
finally spit it out, you're not in the starting position of that conversation, but
Yeah.
you're starting it with somebody that had no idea it existed. And
Exactly.
that's a big problem. My friend, I know we loosely talked about it. My friend said I'm starting an OnlyFans, and I was like, "Oh." And she was like, "Are you
Mhm.
sad?" And I was like, "Yeah." Yeah. And she's like, "Why?" And I was like, "I don't know." Like, it's totally
Mhm.
your right to do that.
Yeah.
And like, I don't certainly don't want to judge you, but as
Yeah.
as your friend that knows you, I love your brain, and I hate to see you not be like loved for that. But I
Mhm.
understand why you're doing it. You need validation and money, or you need things
Mhm.
that it provides. And I'm not going to judge you for making yourself happy, but yeah,
Right.
initially I was sad, but thank you for talking to me about it because I didn't want to
Absolutely.
judge the situation, you know?
Well, yeah, and under capitalism, everybody is a tool.
Mm, yeah,
Um, everybody is a tool. You sell your body to any job for an hourly wage.
that's
So
right.
bringing it back to sex work, selling your body on OnlyFans, how is that any different from selling your body to cut hair, or
Yeah,
selling your body to sit at a computer desk all
yeah.
day? You're
Macy's for
literally
an hour, right?
doing the same thing, and we've so
Yep.
encompass this like idea that sex work is bad, and selling your actual body sexually is bad, that we don't realize that under capitalism, every body is capital. Every body
Yeah,
is for sale.
yeah. And if you're smart, you use your best assets to make the
Yeah,
most money. And I think that might have
exactly.
been part of my point. Like, I know her better than I know other people, and I know she has probably one of my favorite brains,
Yeah.
just the process of which
Mhm.
the struggles that she filters it through,
Yeah.
the intelligence and the life experience. It's like, oh, I worship you for your brain as a sapiophile, but I
Mhm.
understand what you're doing because like maybe that's not your ideal of what you want right now. And
Well,
use it
and
until you lose it for sure. You know what I
and
mean?
right. Well, and also like from an intellectual standpoint, like selling her body by taking pictures or doing something on OnlyFans is
Mm,
actually smarter than selling her brain that not everybody's going to appreciate.
very true.
So, you should celebrate the fact that she made a very intelligent decision with
Oh, I
her
do.
brain to use OnlyFans, which is a fantastic
Yeah.
platform to be able to make some pretty easy money on.
And that's my point. What I saw
Like
as her greatest,
overcome the capitalist system by selling your body for sex. Like, okay, well, you say I'm an object, I'm going to make myself an object, and I'm going to make more money than
yeah,
you, and like fuck the
that's right.
system.
What I saw as her best asset might have not been her most marketable asset. I get that.
Correct.
Yeah,
Correct.
and
Exactly.
judging that just causes me to lose a friend. And
Exactly.
an amazing person that made a decision based on themselves. And
Mhm.
for the record, I know women that have done worse. I'm friends with not worse, different,
Yeah.
um more expansive versions of the umbrella.
Right.
You
Right.
know, and I worship them just as much for the brains that they have. And
Absolutely.
it's
Well,
nice to be able to have a friend like that. It's just the
mhm.
expectations are somebody's going to react this way.
Yeah.
And even if they initially do, there's no coming back from that, but that's not permanent. It's an
Mhm.
understanding, and people that care about you will put the thought into that, and other
Right.
people will just stop at the initial judgment.
Right. Yep.
That's sad.
I know. It is
Hmm.
sad.
You're one of my favorite people, Devi.
Well, thank you.
No
Thanks
problem.
for thanks for taking that journey with me. Um, I get real ranty, and then I go off on tangents. I'm
Yeah.
having a tangent type of week.
Oh,
Uh,
yeah.
so
How are you doing? You got the COVID shot, right?
yeah, I got my second one. As of tomorrow, I'm 100% free. In
Yeah.
to walk outside. Thanks, Fauci. Um, I am very excited. I'm actually going to fly to the East Coast at the end of the month and
Nice.
visit some friends. They bought me a plane ticket to come out and cut their hair.
Aw.
And I thought that was the sweetest thing. And I get to go fly into Boston. I've never been to Boston. I've never been to the East
Wow.
Coast. I've been
That's
to
so
Florida.
cool.
I don't. I feel like Florida counts as the South, so I
Yeah.
I don't call that the East Coast.
Ew,
But
no.
so yeah, I'm pretty excited to do that. And then it's going to be the first time I've been on an airplane since like 2019.
That is so cool.
So I'm a little nervous about it, but all shot up. So I'll just be extra protected and, wear masks and wash my hands and do all that. Sleep
That's
on the
so
plane.
interesting. People that got vaccinated are still wearing masks, but the people that didn't won't. It's
I
America
know.
is so backwards that way.
It is the ultimate group project scenario where
Yeah.
some people are doing all the work and other people are benefiting from it.
I think some people are shutting down their brains and listening to the wrong voices just because they don't want to
Yeah,
think, and other people are overthinking and doing
yeah.
everything they can. And I think
One,
that's awesome.
I think some people are just doing what they want because they want to say fuck the system. I'm better than that, and I'm smarter than that, and it's
Yeah.
like a whole Dunning-Kruger effect.
Yes.
And I'm so tired of those people. I'm so tired of like you know them not participating in a collective of America.
Yeah.
We talk about how united we stand and all this stuff, but here we are just arguing against each other about something that is not politics,
Mm-hmm.
because they are choosing to ignore the facts, and that's just depressing.
Well,
I don't I don't know if I want to talk about that.
pol- politics is we Jeffrey and I were talking about this.
Yeah.
Politics is the illusion around the actual fact of governing.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
if somebody's not governing, it doesn't really matter what they're saying in the atmosphere. If they're not doing the
Right.
job, that makes the difference.
I think there's so much of this that's all just being done out of spite.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
I'm so tired of people doing the like, well, fuck you because I don't want to be seen as a whatever. I'm like, oh my
Yeah.
God, just
When
listen to
I
the people who know more than you.
yeah, when I realized I was getting yelled at the exact same way by Trump supporters as
Yep.
Elizabeth Warren supporters, I was like, oh, there's an issue here.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Like people are so like staunchly set on this like us versus them mentality that they can't
Right.
see beyond their own nose and their own opinions and have a mutual discussion about what's going to be best collectively for all of us.
That's right. They're at the buffet and they only see the chicken or the steak. They don't see the
Yeah.
salads or the dressings or the side condiments or the sides, you know?
Well, and they don't see like the glaringly obvious truth that like they're pitting all the poor people against each other.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's really not a like poor people against poor people mentality. It's a like poor people against rich people mentality, and that's like
Yeah.
what we need to like reframe our brains as is like the people in power, the rich folks. They're
Yep.
the ones that are sitting back laughing, being fully protected and like totally fine and able to like run away whenever they want to Cancun
Yep.
or or whatever,
Yeah.
and they're just laughing at us. And I'm
They are. I've watched them do it.
yeah,
And the
and
biggest
they're
trick is for rich people to tell poor people that poorer people are the issue, that
exactly.
somehow immigrants are stealing your education
Yeah.
and taking your jobs. Wait, who's
Mhm.
giving the immigrant the job and where do they go after they're educated? You know, and
Right.
those are the two issues people. Somebody
Yeah.
told me Bill Clinton, he's the reason there's no jobs here.
Yeah.
And we're giving all of our welfare and education to immigrants. And I
Yeah.
was like, no, we're a consumer-based economy. We need new
Yeah.
mouths to feed to grow.
Yeah.
And who was in charge after Bill Clinton? Like,
Yeah. Right. Well, and like this whole restaurant workers, right? Like
mm,
a lot of restaurants are currently like posting signs. Well, we're closed because we can't find any workers. It's like,
right,
no, you're closed because people have become like enlightened to the idea that they can't afford to work for you.
right. If
So
you're
you're the
small,
problem. Don't try to pit us against each other. I think we're
that's
all starting
right.
to see that the issue is that people are staying on unemployment benefits because they make slightly more than what they would if they're actually working at a shitty little restaurant that treats them like garbage and fires them if they
Right.
call out sick. Like,
If
no,
un
the problem isn't that you can't find workers. The problem is you can't find workers because you refuse to compensate them fairly.
if unemployment was meant to be the bare minimum and you're
Right.
paying them less, then you
Yeah.
shouldn't be in business, right? You shouldn't have
Yeah.
expanded as much as you did, as fast
Well,
as you did.
unemployment was put in place originally to be a bare minimum for a family of four to have one income to pay for everything that you need. That
Right.
was minimum wage. But we've reframed minimum wage in the, the past 20 years to be, oh, well, minimum wage is like for people who don't deserve to make more money, like, or something.
Yeah. Or high
You know,
school kids.
yeah,
Like,
it's for high schoolers. It's for people just starting out. Okay, but
right.
then if a minimum wage job is just for high schoolers, why are you shopping there outside of high school hours? Like,
Right.
why are you going there when high schoolers at school?
Yeah.
If
But
a
the que
minimum wage job is that, then why are you insisting that you go eat at Starbucks during the middle of the day? Or why are you insisting that you go to McDonald's during the middle of the day? These are
hmm
places that pay people minimum wage.
Right. Or sometimes they pay better, actually. But
Sometimes.
maybe some people don't want to devote all of their time and effort into their job and instead want to time and effort into their family.
Yeah,
And so I don't want a stockbroker job when I can have a McDonald's job and actually if I could get a living wage, spend time growing my family and educating my kids, you know?
absolutely. Absolutely. That's part of what I love about my job is like when it's kind of a misnomer to say I can pick my own hours. I pick the
Mhm.
hours that people are going to show up,
Right.
but I can take time off when I need, but I don't get paid time off. People are like,
Right.
"Oh, well, it's so easy for you." I'm like, "It's not because if I want to go on vacation, I have to save for a year, and that
Right.
money doesn't go towards my vacation. That money goes towards me being able to pay my bills." So I have to
Right.
save doubly to be able to do anything fun when I'm on my vacation.
Right.
So, like, no, I don't get to choose, when I work, but like I do get to choose that in that I get to spend more time with my family and work the hours that I want to work,
Yep.
So there's a trade-off there, right? But if it was required, like in a lot of other countries, that everybody get a specific amount of paid time off,
Yep.
that would make my life so much easier because then I
Everybody.
would be able to save money to do fun things on my vacation,
Yeah, I saved up a year to go to Las Vegas. I went to Las Vegas and was scared to spend $5 because that meant I had
right?
$5 left to spend. And
Exactly.
I actually came home with like $100 less than the $500 I brought in Las Vegas
Yeah,
because I was too scared to spend money on anything. You want to go see that show? How much is it? 200. That would only leave me with 300. I don't know. I don't want to. And what
right?
kind of vacation is that? I'd rather stay home and spend 200 on drugs.
Right? Absolutely. And I wonder why we're like so like
Yeah.
highly medicated and depressed and
Yeah.
anxious,
Because drugs are a better vacation for poor people.
Absolutely.
Fuck yeah.
Absolutely. It's incredibly expensive to be poor.
It really is. It really is. 80% of my income goes to housing and bills.
Yeah. And so like they wonder why we're trying to figure out ways to not go to work. Well,
Yeah.
w- what else would we do? Like what else are we going to do,
In my case,
No wonder we're starting OnlyFans because it's
they won't let me go to work in my case, like
yeah, if
you're
you're on
on disability.
disability,
If you
you
make money,
you
you lose it. Well, I
right.
can't depend on that job.
Yeah, that's fucked up. Like if you make any more money, like there's a set
Yeah,
amount of money that you can make, and if you
right.
make more than that, then you lose your disability, which is how
hmm
you pay your bills. Like
Yeah, but
so they want to keep you poor,
that's all
and it's
based on a tax
punishment.
structure. I can't possibly understand the tax
Yeah,
structure. If I make $2,000, but you take 500 in taxes, does that mean I made 1,500, which is under, or does it mean I made 2,000, which is over? And
exactly.
trying to stay within that and not have any control of the deductions in the office and the regulations that go into that, I don't know. You could change it in a minute and then I'd be screwed. And
Yeah,
so you keep me in poverty because I can't attain anything else. You can't
right.
have more than $2,000 in your bank account to have Medicare. You'll lose your Medicare if you have it.
Yeah,
People, if you get married, you lose your certain deductions. You lose your Medicare. So people aren't
right.
doing that. And it's the stuff that's just it blows my mind, and that's why
Yeah.
I advocate for disability rights, you know?
Oh, absolutely. Like, I mean, I'm terrified of that, you know. I got a degree and I spent 40
Mm-hmm.
grand that I couldn't afford to get a degree just in case something happened where I couldn't cut hair anymore. And
Right.
like I did it out of like fear because I have a disability as well, and I was like, well, what if something happens and I have to, like, I can't stand anymore, or what if
Right.
something happens and I can't use my hands anymore because I get
Yeah.
nerve issues all the time.
Right.
And so I spent more money to do that, but like I wanted to be able to, like, okay, well, maybe if I get a job in this, like I could just do speaking arrangements or something like that,
Right.
like, and make money based off of that. But like, you shouldn't have to be punished for having a disability. You can't help it. Like, it's not like
Right.
I asked for this, you know?
And there is going to come a point when I can't work. I wish
Yeah.
if they said, 80% of your income needs to go into a, a, a 401k or an annuity or an investment, then
Mhm.
for your future, that would be
Yeah.
fine. But let me make it for my future.
Yeah.
You're saying I can't even have a safety net of my own, that you'll be my safety net, and then you go and you cut my safety net every year.
Wait, I think there is some sort of special savings account. I don't know if it's just in Washington, but like there's some sort of savings account that you can have when you're on disability that allows you to make more money.
Okay.
Um, I heard about it recently. I haven't looked more into it, but um,
I'm
because
gonna have to.
yeah, but there's some special thing that you can get that, like, you automatically put your extra money into, and I think there's a
Right.
cap on how much you can have, but it allows you to have a safety net for the extra money without having to spend all of it. Does that make sense? Like, so you don't have to
Yeah.
spend all the money in your bank account, because
Right.
whatever's left over you can put into this special savings account. Um, and I
I
don't know
love that.
exactly what you have to use it for, but there are some new programs out there like that. I'll have to look it up. It's in, I think, a couple of my like EDS forums
Okay.
uh, on Facebook. But I will get that information to you and see what that looks like.
I love it. I'm going
Oh,
to
excuse me.
I'm gonna run to the bathroom really quick.
Yeah, absolutely.
But thanks for being here.
Yeah,
I'll see you next week with that information.
yeah. I'll give my headset back to Jeff here.
Woohoo! I'll be right back.
All right.
And that is why, when it comes to a very hot topic that I know nothing about, hand it off to somebody who does know something about it. Because let's face it, I did not have that kind of information to give.
I'm coming, Jeffrey.
Oh, I know you are. I know you are.
Hey,
When you get all that good information, everybody's coming. I mean,
I feel like you and I like drove forward in a conversation, and then Devi got on, and we kind of backtracked our way through that same conversation.
right, but that's just one of those things. Like there's literally only so much that I can speak towards
Oh yeah, yeah.
until I find myself in a position where I'm either A, not going to have the best information, or B, I'm totally going to fuck something up and
Right.
get it wrong. In which case, I totally wait for the head to tilt sideways to be like, are you going to say it? Come on, let's hear you say it.
And
And that's when I know I'm like, we're gonna stop right there, and I'm gonna
yeah,
shut up before I do something really dumb.
we're not really scripted. So, I mean, those events aren't planned. I couldn't tell Devi, tomorrow at 11 or 9:28 a.m. we're going to be. So,
Yeah, it's not like we had this idea that, oh yeah, no, we're totally gonna get on the topic of sex work, and then
right.
surprise, Debbie's gonna show up, and it's gonna be that came out of nowhere and went
Right.
somewhere.
And she's always, they're always welcome to come on the show. Devi, but
Absolutely.
I also know that like she's stretched really thin, as everybody is these days. And so I told her that I would not pressure her to come on, and I would appreciate the time they gave me.
Absolutely. And that's just it, is that, you know, uh,
You're
I
a
think
lucky
I
guy to
think
be in that household, though.
I I I no, I am. I truly am lucky to have a partner with the wealth of knowledge that they do,
Hmm.
and thus it also explains a lot of why I'm attracted to them. Is that
Right.
they have so much knowledge that I simply don't possess, and
Yeah.
I love the fact that I'm able to learn and have an intelligent and conversation with someone who, in fact, knows more about a lot of things
Yeah.
and can either educate me or guide me towards resources
Those are the
to
those are the
teach me.
partners I pick all the time, are the partners that can give me a verbal beatdown and put me in my place when it needs to be. And that gives me the ability to be ignorant and honestly ignorant, because ignorant is just not knowing. Stupidity is knowing that you should know and choosing not to. So I
Yeah.
love being ignorant once. You know?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's always magical, especially when Debbie gets a topic that they know something about, and then
Yeah,
it's just
yeah,
like,
yeah.
I suppose this is where I shut up because you're about to get really passionate about this, and I kind of like to hear that.
It's my favorite. Why would I talk to an analyst about sex work when I could talk to somebody
Right.
that knows it? I'm not going to ask her about like the normal natural curve of statistics, right?
Exactly. Right. Exactly. you know you
Nice.
talk to me about the math, you talk to Debbie about the science, and like I said, I know the business
Yeah.
structures and the corporate stuff very well,
Hmm.
but when it comes to the actual when it comes to that side of things, no.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And admittedly so, it's not my area of expertise, and that's perfectly fine. But it goes to that whole topic that we were talking about, is that you have to let people who know something about the topic
Mm-hmm.
speak out and be willing to listen,
Yeah.
because otherwise, you just get a couple of dudes sitting there going, "Oh, so this is what sex work is," and no,
Right.
no, yeah, no,
That's
no,
right.
no.
Then you're Jim Jordan, a white guy yelling at Val Demings, a black guy, about
Yeah,
police reform, never being
yeah.
a police officer.
No, seriously, that's probably the best analogy, is that you end up being Jim Jordan yelling at Val Demings, a black woman with
Yeah,
25 years
yeah.
of police experience, about what policing is.
Right. But as you were leaving, like I said, how come I'm the idiot that has to sit here and go have the conversation? Like I'm always the ignorant one bringing up. Sometimes, like I just throw different perspectives out there, and sometimes it's like I take a reach in logic and then backfill with reason. You know what I mean?
Well, and that's just it. And Devi hit on so many great points. It's just like,
Mhm.
I'm just gonna let that conversation stand as it is, because
Yeah,
that has the information that I would hope to see and hope to hear, and
yeah.
absolutely brilliant.
It's just amazing to me that like we can have those conversations and she's not mad at me because I was too stuck in a ignorance or a perspective like, no, I only see it this way and therefore it has to be wrong. I came to conclusions just in the conversation with her about things that I had been thinking about that I couldn't come to conclusions on my own about, you know. So thank you to Devi. And she doesn't hate me because I'm a man, you know. So
Right.
I appreciate that.
But Devi has an appreciation for anybody willing to learn.
Yeah, that's me.
That's the nice thing, is
As
that
you can
when
tell, I'm going through her and they. Like
no,
it's
no,
trying to process my brain to certain things, you know?
No, I mean, getting someone's pronouns right is always a challenge. That's
Yeah.
that's just it. It's that you have to be willing to work on it as much as possible to try and
Yeah.
get it right. And
Yeah.
and you, Debbie will be able to talk more about that once
I-
again, because I'm not
Yeah.
that wealth of knowledge.
Oh no, we don't have to go there today. I,
No, but definitely
yeah.
worthwhile, and I know that we have a larger group of friends that would be able to better inform all of us on that, and
Right.
why that's.
The
But
thing,
it goes back to the whole, like, just be kind to people, like,
yeah. And share
regardless.
share honestly. Like what Devi teaches me, I taught Brittany um Inspirations Beyond Disabilities, because she was like, if somebody has her on her, her pronouns on her page, does that mean she's transgender automatically? And I was like, no, everybody could do it. And she was like, well, I'm a she, her, hers. And I was like, you are, but you could also be a they, theirs. Like, it doesn't exclude you from using those terms as well, and
Hmm.
we were talking to Daisy, who just started a group for queer disabled people looking for better days, better future. And she's gender fluid and she doesn't care. You could call her a he or a her or a they, because the truth is it's about how they're feeling in that moment. You know what I mean? And
Right.
you can't predict that. Honestly, Devi might be feeling more masculine one day and I call her a she and it's irritating, or I call her a he by mistake. And so yeah, we need to appreciate the fact that we don't all know everything all the time. We're all not so woke ass that we can never make a mistake.
Right. And that's also the funny thing about language is that
Mhm.
when you look at language, for example, in German, you have masculine, feminine, and neutral.
Yeah,
The formal way that you address people is actually a neutral.
it should be, right?
And so, like, if you want to formally address someone, it's Z is, for example, is like Z is the formal way uh,
Right.
of addressing someone.
The singular Latino is a man, the singular Latina is a woman, but Latinos speaks for the whole group.
What? Hmm? A neopronoun? I do not know about neopronouns.
I do not either. Uh-oh.
Well, Z in German, SIE,
Ah,
is
okay.
formal for talking about something. I did not know about that one though.
Z, she, with
Like
a
like the letter Z.
ZHE.
Oh, interesting. Did not know about that.
I've heard about them actually.
Neopronouns in the English language. That sounds like another fantastic topic.
We'll do that next week. Anyway, so
That's yeah. Well, we'll get Devi on and we'll get Devi on and have
yeah,
them
yeah,
talk
yeah.
about that.
I
But
got
yeah,
to
I
I
mean
got what?
I mean,
Uh-oh.
like in the formal language in German though, you would say Z in order
Mm-hmm.
to talk about anybody, and
Yeah,
it's neutral. It's
right.
inherently neutral. So
And just for all full disclosure, I call you he, I call Devi she, you're both theys, and I've never looked in either one of your pantses, so I have no proof of anything. It's just the stereotypical what I see. You know what I mean?
right.
You have a beard, Devi has long hair, so that's what I do. But I know men with long hair and I tend to call them she too. So I have
I used to have long hair, and I miss
yeah,
having long hair, but
me
damn
too.
genetics, damn genetics taking away my hairline.
I did love my long hair, but it was just so dry and anything. So, I was having this discussion with a libertarian and he was
Mm.
drinking and I was trying to irritate him. And he was like, "Well, I want smaller government." And I was like, "Who are you going to leave out?" And he's like, "What?" And he's like, "Well, what do you want government to be?" And I was like, "Everybody." And he's like, "What?" And I was like, "I want everybody to work for the government." And I was taking that leap, right? That leap of logic and backfilling with reason because I was arguing with a drunk libertarian and it was easy to do.
Well,
But then I go on Twitter and I see Ilhan Omar, and I love Ilhan Omar, don't get me wrong, but she said, we need Medicare for all, which I thought was ridiculous. But one of the things she said in that, besides housing for all, which is so vague, it irritated me, was, let me see if I can, this government jobs program, guaranteed jobs. Where did it go? Damn it. I had it. It's such weird language. But basically, they think that the government should be creating here federal jobs guarantee program. Fuck. And I realized that my rhetoric was being like overheard and turned into policies. And it
yeah.
shouldn't. It shouldn't because I was drunk. Please, government, don't try and give jobs to everybody.
Well, that's one of those things. Like when you look at the history of some of, like for example, like our great infrastructure
Hmm.
boosts. during and post World War II, you had this massive, like during the Great Depression, World War
Right.
II, and post World War II, you had this great boost because the feds hired a lot of people to build a lot of infrastructure.
Yeah.
It's how you end up getting the modern electrical grid. It's how you end
Yeah.
up getting the modern interstate system. Um, it's it's how you get modern telecommunications systems.
Sure.
The government invested in a lot of manpower to do it themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And then of course later it got deemed unconstitutional. So then we go back to this whole everything being, things being funded by the government but built by the lowest bidder.
Right.
So, you know, it's one of those things where yeah, I can see why people like having government involvement, but they're held to this idea of what it looked like when Roosevelt did it,
Right.
and that's just not how it works anymore. Um, it's not to say that that's not how it couldn't work, um,
Right. Right.
but the reality of the current situation, the reality of the current court rulings is that there's no way that the feds are going to be able to hire a road crew, for example, and have
Right.
their own road crew like they did once upon a time ago.
I don't think we want them to. I think they're too far removed. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. I think they're too far removed. I think states know better where their pain points are in terms of infrastructure, like roads.
Mm.
But I also see too that there are states out there that have created pain points that need to be addressed. Like, for example, Washington recently, I believe they finally removed the restriction that only like telecom companies could provide internet service. So now
Oh
you could
wow.
actually have public utility internet service.
Okay.
So, and of course, there's a bunch of people saying, "Oh, well, that's going to go poorly," and then people keep pointing to like this area of Tennessee that has consistently good, consistently fast internet service that's a public utility.
Right.
At one point in time, absolutely, I saw the internet as, just something that, you paid to have access for, and it
Right.
was kind of a luxury. There wasn't the internet as we know it now didn't exist when we were listening to the fucking dial-up tones and
Sure.
hoping that we could chat on MSN Messenger and have someone ask us weird questions at 17 while all the way across the state of Montana. I
And now,
love you.
now that's what Snapchat's for.
Yeah, now but now there's been a strategic move by some people, by some groups, to look at internet as a utility,
Well,
and
I,
I think that absolutely should be the case. I think that we've moved past the point of the internet just being this luxury item to a necessity, no different than electricity, no different than plumbing, sewer, water, trash. we
well,
we as a people we are bound by the internet in ways that we never thought about 20-30 years ago,
when
for
my
example.
when my utility says that I have to go online to pay my bill, it's no longer a luxury, it's a mandatory necessity that I shouldn't be paying for.
Absolutely.
When I can only access Social Security via the internet or a phone call, then you fail to have any grounds to charge me for it. It should be free because now you're making me use it for
Or
access.
if my kids have to have internet access in order to be able to go to school,
Right,
or in order to be able to do their homework,
right,
or I have to have the internet access in order to be able to work, a job.
right.
It's gone beyond being the luxury item that it once was, that we used to dick around on and send
Mm-hmm.
messages and post pictures and occasionally look up the news and poor audio quality, poor
Yeah,
video quality things. There is absolutely an entertainment side to the internet, but there is a mandatory side of the internet that we have to address now. And I think that if you want the true spirit of cooperation, and competition, then you have to look at the internet as a public utility.
yeah.
And if you want to compete for that business, if, let's say, Washington sets up its own public utility internet service, Now Comcast and CenturyLink and Frontier, they're also out here. Now they all have to figure out how they're going to provide a service that is better and either as cost effective, or
Mhm.
they're going to have some sort of special bonus that makes buying internet service from them worth it. Whereas right now, that competition doesn't exist. It's like you have to go with Comcast if you want fast internet service. You
Sure.
have to go with CenturyLink if you want cheap internet service. You you can go with Frontier if they happen to provide service to where you're at.
If they're allowed to provide it.
Right, because we had Frontier when we lived up in North Seattle, and it was awesome internet service.
Hmm.
But then we moved, and we could only get Comcast, and that sucked.
Yeah.
And Frontier, they could only provide like, oh, I mean, it was like a tenth of what we were getting, and that wasn't worth it. So we had to switch. Comcast is just kind of what we've been stuck with. CenturyLink is always a disaster,
Yep.
and the only other competition that was out there was effectively barred from being competitive.
Right.
So now what you have is, Thurston County here where I'm at, they're gonna, if they decide to have their own countywide, if the state of Washington decides to do their own public utility internet, what they're going to have to do is they're going to have to create a robust infrastructure that is going to be able to meet the people's needs and compete with Comcast's. They're going to have that level of infrastructure built in order to make it worthwhile. Or Comcast is going to have to significantly invest in their infrastructure to outcompete the public utility ideal. The end result being that ultimately, I think the internet needs to be treated like a public utility anymore, and that there is no longer this you don't need to access the internet, because
Mhm.
that is not true in the slightest. Yeah, I could still walk into my bank to go do some banking things,
Right.
but the idea that I can go to Comcast and go pay my bill is absolutely ludicrous at best.
Right.
Because guess what? If I go to Comcast, they're going to put me on a machine that has the internet in order to pay my bill. And if I have to do that for every little thing that I do, what time does that leave me to actually do the things that I need to do?
Mhm.
When it comes to schooling, if my kids have to have the internet in order to do their homework, like the function of schooling has changed in such that, you know, teachers are relying on the internet more and more to boost their
Right.
curriculum. And I think that's fantastic because, there is such a wealth of knowledge out there that, kids should be able to access and have access to. The fact of the matter is that the internet has so many things involved in it now that we can use it. My kids use it all the time to learn new things. I mean,
Yep.
they can pick it up at the drop of the hat. I use it all the time to fix things. So that way, I don't have to go out and hire a contractor or take my car to the shop. You
Mhm.
know, I can turn a wrench. I just need to know what I need to turn.
Yeah. Which one? Yeah. Which bolt to turn?
You know,
I think it's I don't like it's a they say about driver's licenses. A driver's license is a privilege, not a right. But I think the internet is a right, not a privilege anymore.
I would almost agree with that, and
Nice.
I would say almost simply because that means that you can take it from somewhere,
Yeah.
and that just currently doesn't exist, unfortunately.
Right. Right. I
And because there's no steady way for you to go and obtain this right.
know.
It's like you're not going to just show up to Comcast and be like, give me your internet, and that's going to work.
You can't go out into a field and mine internet.
Yeah, there's no protections in place for you to be able to secure your internet access, like
Right.
there is with water. For example, there's always that, what if my water gets shut off? Well, in different places, like for example in Arizona, they have laws on the books that you can't shut off someone's power during certain times.
Right.
But that doesn't stop them, to
Like in
be perfectly
Chicago, you
honest.
can't shut off somebody's gas in the winter.
Right. Yeah, there are certain things that you can and can't do. And it's really that's where it gets rough.
Mm-hmm.
the internet is far greater of a necessity than it ever was. When I was a kid growing up.
Yeah.
I remember how nervous and scared my mom was to even check her bank account on the internet
Right.
when that was a thing you could finally do.
Yeah.
Now it's like literally, you just pull it up on your phone and be like, oh, cool, I'm not entirely broke today. Sweet, I am
Yeah.
gonna buy that thing.
My mom actually struggled with that at the same time as the microwave. Like,
Right.
it doesn't. I don't want to check my bank account, and don't you dare use that big box that somebody gave us to cook your bacon.
Right. You know, we need the internet for a variety of reasons.
Mhm.
Absolutely, there's a lot of it that gets used for luxury. There's no
Yeah.
question about that.
Sure.
But there is even more of it that gets used for legitimate business or schooling purposes
Hmm.
that access just cannot be taken away.
Right.
If something were to happen and my internet were to be cut off today, I wouldn't be able to work. My
Nope.
kids wouldn't be able to go to school.
Nope. You couldn't pay your bills. You'd be feral by
Couldn't.
the end of the week.
I would have to literally go places to pay my bills, which a lot of places here you can't even do that
You
without an
can't do
appointment.
that, right? Yeah. No.
Or I'd have to go to my bank and I'd have to work with them to get all of these bill pay issues set up.
Yeah.
My loans, my student loans, need the internet because I legitimately can't do anything,
Right.
unless I either call them. But most of the time, when they're available for me to talk to, I'm working. So it makes it easier. It's a lot more instantaneous. And even in their training, they're directed to send people to the internet first to
Mm-hmm.
go solve their own issues,
Hell
unless
yeah.
there's some massive problem that they cannot do or handle without talking to somebody.
Right. Medicare just sent me an email. Do you want to go paperless? And I was like, I've always wanted to go paperless. Thank you. It's about time. Like, welcome to the 20th century.
Right. Seriously. There is a convenience to it,
Hmm.
but anymore, I go to the mail because I get junk mail. Sometimes I get a package, sometimes, and very rarely do I ever get anything important.
Right.
And then of course, then there's, my personal favorite is the letter from the IRS that shows up,
Hmm.
which I I do not like getting mail from the IRS. I've gotten mail from the IRS 3 times. One of them was for like an $1,100 bill when we didn't even have $100 to our name.
Right.
And then the other two was Trump's propaganda letter about the fucking economic stimulus, and now Biden's propaganda letter about the economic stimulus.
Hmm.
It's like okay, IRS, can we please come up with a different system where, like, if you're mailing me, I need to know that it's either I'm getting a refund, hooray, or I'm gonna have
Yeah.
to pay you money and I need to fight you. And
Right.
then all these other propaganda bullshit letters, can they come from somewhere else? Because they're unless you are like the mega rich, nobody is looking forward to a letter from the fucking IRS. Their first
Right.
thought is always, oh great, how much am I getting fucked for now?
Yep.
Who fucked up my tax return? How screwed am I? Where am I going to come up with the money to? It's nobody ever gets a letter from the IRS and they're like, "Oh, thank God the IRS is sending me a letter. It's got to
Yeah.
be my lucky day." Unless, no, it's not. It never is.
I don't know. Imagine getting a letter from the IRS and having it sit on your counter for over a year because you can't tell it's from the IRS. Like Social Security, they call me. They call me. I'm not answering it. Like my phone automatically silences phone calls that I don't know. So you send me a letter. Well, guess what? I can't read the mail. So what do you want? What do you want? Why can't you email me? Why can't you text me? Like everybody else, Pizza Hut can text me, but you can't. You're the Social Security Administration. You can do whatever you want. You have my email. You asked for it when I signed up, but you refused to send me anything of any importance through it.
Right, and that's, it's just absolutely funny because even when I worked in the court system in Arizona, Like there were judges that legitimately would not take anything that came through the fax. Like, don't get me wrong. I was trying to figure out who in the fuck still used fax when
Right.
email is a perfectly acceptable option with much better quality. But some places you could, they only accepted things by mail or by fax. So if you needed to get something there now, fax was your
Mm,
only option. And then there were fewer places that even accepted fax, and I'm like, what the fuck is this?
yeah.
It's like you literally have a courts.az.gov
Mm,
web, email address. It's literally a document that is being copied to, one attorney and another attorney that's being filed. I don't understand what the problem is here, but okay, sure. And then some courts, have set up their official channels where it's like, hey, if you're going to file something, it has to be done in our official channel. Okay, that's fine. I can accept that because, then it's like it hit your system.
right.
So I get it.
It's a funnel point, and that's always acceptable. But I
I
think
get
a
it.
lot of, a lot of government is just using antiquated technology. It just really is, and I don't.
Day late and
They,
a dollar short.
yeah, I mean, they're taking so much of our money and not investing it in governmental infrastructure, and that's an issue. That's the issue with the Medicare system. But
Oh,
Jeffrey,
absolutely.
we're running out of time, so
We are.
I'm just going to ask you, how'd you feel about the Born Identity series?
I loved the first movie a lot. Second movie was all
Yeah,
right. Third movie was
yeah.
good.
Was it
It was all right. I
like
mean,
the
it was good
The
enough.
Born Legacy? Was he in it?
Born. So there's yeah. So what was it? Born Identity,
Identity,
Supremacy, Ultimatum.
Supremacy, Legacy.
I thought it was Ultimatum, and then Legacy was the
Uh,
fourth one that they did with someone else.
2002, 2004, 2007. So and those are the three. I don't know what
Yeah,
those.
yeah.
There
I
might be
think it's
something in between there.
Identity, Supremacy, Ultimatum, and then there was one that came later, and I think that one was called Legacy.
Yeah, it's like the
Because
Tokyo Drift of the series. I don't know
yeah,
if
it was
Jason
it
Bourne
was.
was in it at all. So I
I
missed
don't
the
think so.
third one. I missed the third one then.
So it was all right. I mean, it's action. You
Yeah,
know, it's you. I would say you're not looking for cinematic art. You're just looking for a movie that has a lot of guns and ass kicking and explosions.
right.
And if that's what you want, then it's fantastic because I love some of those movies. It's like I didn't watch The Expendables because I knew that it was going to be this great cinematic masterpiece. I want to watch a bunch of old action stars just blow shit up and shoot guns and fuck it. It delivers on that alone.
Fuck yeah. Some greats in there, right? Oh
Oh yeah,
man.
you got a lot of the old greats. It's
Mm,
like I said, you're not looking for a cinematic masterpiece. You just want to see guns and explosions,
yeah.
and old guys with muscles doing epic handshakes. You're not after anything fantastic.
Yeah, that's true. I
It's
never watched anything with Sylvester Stallone in it for its cinematic relevance.
right, exactly.
Wow, as I was saying that there was a movie where he was in and it actually was pretty cinematic and he was a sheriff in it. It was pretty good. And
Mm,
I can't remember the name of it, but it had like 30 of the most awesome actors in it, so
yeah, I remember. I don't remember the name of the movie, but I know what you're talking about.
yeah, there you go. So, but still Sylvester Stallone, you don't watch him for his acting prowess. Thanks for being here, Jeffrey.
Of
What a
course.
day. For a day
What
that
an adventure.
I still feel totally unprepared for today, but we got some good stuff in there.
Look, nobody is ever prepared for Devi to do a total knowledge drop on them.
Right?
But you're gonna get that knowledge and you're gonna appreciate it.
At least with Devi, I can plead ignorance and she can teach me, and I don't have to like feign knowledge in the subject. I can just be like throw myself on the mercy of Devi's,
Yep.
person education.
Yeah.
Love you, Jeffrey.
Devi too.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Public Access America. You can find us, as always, on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, the Google Play, Player FM, TuneIn Radio, the Stitcher Smart Radio app, and thank you to Overcast and Pocket Cast for being our apps of the month. I really enjoy y'all. Yep. No, I didn't think so. We didn't have any comments in the chat because that's the way it goes. Sunday morning. I love y'all.